Hi, I'm Robert Williamson Jr. I'm professor of religious studies at Hendrix College and the co-host of the Bible Worm podcast. I'm also the author of this little book that we're talking about today, The Forgotten Books of the Bible, Recovering the Five Scrolls for Today. This is the second lecture on the book of Ecclesiastes. If you haven't seen the first video on Ecclesiastes, I would encourage you to go back and look at that because it kind of sets the stage for what we're going to do with the book in today's conversation. Just to catch us up, basically last time we looked at Ecclesiastes' worldview. We talked about the main speaker, the gatherer. His kind of orienting question to the book is, what profit is there in all the toil that we toil under the sun? What is there to gain? And so he's thinking about the question that we might ask is, what does my life add up to? When I get to the end of my life, when I look back on what my life has produced, what is there going to be left over that will have some kind of lasting significance? And Ecclesiastes' answer is that famous line, vanity of vanities, everything is vanity. Or in the Hebrew, havel havalim, utter breath, utter vapor, everything is merely vapor. The idea that Ecclesiastes has is that time gets the best of everything. Eventually, anything we produce is going to be lost or forgotten in the sands of time, and so nothing we can achieve in this life really amounts to anything at all in the big picture. The reason that Ecclesiastes kind of ends up there is because of the problem of death. His tradition had taught him that if you were righteous and you died, your name would be preserved, your memory would be preserved, your inheritance would be preserved, your teachings would be preserved among the people who come after you. But if you were wicked, then your name would be cut off, you'd be forgotten right away. What Ecclesiastes thinks is, well, if you go down the line 2 or 3 generations, we're all forgotten, righteous and wicked alike. We die the same kind of death and we're forgotten. Not only that for Ecclesiastes, but when we're in this life, he thinks that our consequences don't come directly from our actions. So righteous people end up getting bad consequences and wicked people end up prospering. He thinks the world doesn't work the way it's supposed to, which leads him into thinking about what God is like, to which he concludes that God is doing things in the world, but we don't know what those things are, and we don't have any access to what God values and doesn't value. And so we just get what we get, and we can't change God's mind about things. We can't encourage God to reward us or punish us. Life is just going to happen to us the way that it happens. So that's where we ended last time. And then I promised you that we were going to have some good news. And so what I want to do today is to look at some of the things that Ecclesiastes suggests might be ways that we could live positively in a world that is like that. So this is what Ecclesiastes comes up with. He looks around and he sees all the things that a human being can do with our life. He realizes this problem about things that we try to do that add up to something, never adding up to anything really in the long run. And he says, there's nothing better for human beings than to eat, drink, and experience pleasure in their hard work. So enjoy the moment is what he's saying. My students always want to read this as eat, drink, and be merry. It's a, kind of a carpe diem kind of thing. And I mean, this is close, but there's an important difference there at the end, which is Ecclesiastes, eat, drink, and experience pleasure in your hard work, right? So Ecclesiastes isn't saying we ought to just goof off and enjoy ourselves. He thinks there's value in work, but the value in work is exactly the enjoyment of the work that you do. Now, notice that Ecclesiastes doesn't say do work you enjoy. He says enjoy work that you do. And that's an important difference. If we try to think about, well, you always ought to do work that you enjoy, you can just end up chasing this idea of an ideal profession, an ideal career, an ideal life that you'll never actually catch up to, and you'll just live your life being frustrated that things haven't come together for you. For Ecclesiastes, the point is enjoy the work that you do, no matter what it is. So if what you're doing today is sweeping the yard or mopping the kitchen, if what your profession is a rocket scientist or somebody who cleans bathrooms, whatever it is, find a way to enjoy it. It might remind you a little bit of the Seven Dwarfs, the whistle while you work. You go off to the mine with a song on your lips. Enjoy the work that you find to do. That's Ecclesiastes' advice. Now, a little bit later, he gives us the same idea, but he adds a new twist to it. So he says, there's nothing better for human beings than to enjoy what they do because that's their share in life. Here he introduces the idea of a share. In Hebrew, that word is chelek. You see it again in 5:18. He says, "This is the one thing I've seen that is good. It's appropriate for people to eat, drink, and find enjoyment in all their hard work under the sun, because during the brief time that God gives them, because that's their share, their chelek in life." So chelek, like profit, yitron, that we saw in 1:3, is another term that comes out of economic language in the Persian period. Yitron, as we talked about, what does my life add up to? What gain is there? What profit is there? That's the balance at the end of the fiscal year, right? What is there left over that has permanent value? Chelek is not that. Chelek is something that has value right now, but it's not permanent value. When I was writing the book, I was trying to think what's the example that kind of gets at that? And what I came up with, I don't know if it's that great, but what I came up with was, it's like somebody gives you a Starbucks card that expires tomorrow. And so you could go right now and enjoy your Frappuccino and, sit out on the patio and enjoy the breeze and drink your Frappuccino. And there's value in that. But if you stick it in your pocket, if you save it till tomorrow, if you gather all of the Starbucks cards you can, and at the end of your life on your deathbed, you count how many Starbucks cards you gained, there's no value in that. It has value, but it's not permanent value, and it's not value that can be counted on in the long term. You don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, and so your chelek is something that has value now, and you should enjoy it now. That leads us to this poem in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. This is probably the most famous part of Ecclesiastes. And if you've only ever heard one sermon on Ecclesiastes, and not all of us have even heard a sermon at all. If you've only heard one, it's probably from this passage. The Byrds famously turned this into that song, Turn, 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 for everything there is a time. So it goes like this. There's a season for everything and a time for every matter under the heavens. So what Ecclesiastes is doing, what the gatherer is doing, is he's going to think about life as the unfolding of seasons. Rather than life moving from here to here on a straight line, life moves in this kind of circularity, the back and forth of a seasonal existence. So he says a time for giving birth, a time for dying, a time for planting, a time for uprooting what was planted, a time for killing, a time for healing, a time for tearing down and building up, crying, laughing, mourning, dancing, throwing stones, gathering stones, embracing, avoiding embraces, searching, losing, keeping, throwing, tearing, repairing, keeping silent, speaking, loving, hating, war, and peace. So if you think about this image, right, of these seasons, there's some real beauty in this poem just by itself. There are seasons in life. Those seasons are appropriate to their moment. And none of those seasons is permanent. So the good news about that is if you are in a season of mourning, that season of mourning isn't going to last forever. Seasons of mourning have their place, but they don't have a permanent place. And so your mourning is going to give way to dancing at some point in the future. So what you can take from that is, when it's a season of mourning, just have a season of mourning and let it be what it is, and try to experience it for what it is, knowing that it's going to give way to a season of dancing and that you'll strap on your dancing shoes and hit the floor sometime again in the future. Now, the problem is the opposite is also true, right? So if you're in a time of dancing right now, don't get too attached to the dancing. There's going to be a time of mourning that's going to come. Dancing seasons don't last forever. We're not always happy. We're not always laughing. We're not always young. We're not always healthy. And so these seasons that we're in are going to yield eventually to some other kind of thing. And that's true whether the season you're in right now is one of mourning or one of dancing, one of weeping or one of laughing. Life is moving back and forth between these. And so the advice that Kohelet is giving us is be in the season that you're in. Don't wish the season you were in were something else. You can't change the season. So appreciate the season, experience the season, and don't be anxious that you're going to get stuck in that season, or don't try to hang on to that season. Don't spend so much time when it's time to dance. Don't spend so much time worrying about the next time there's going to be mourning that you forget to dance, right? Go dance. It's dancing time. That's what Ecclesiastes is after. This is a really beautiful idea, and it's one that I think if we could get our heads around. So we're not on a trajectory of life where things build on each other in some kind of reliable way, and we can achieve some sort of permanent state of happiness. We're in a seasonal existence where things move back and forth based on things that happen to us, to our relationships, to our health, to our work, to our, communities. Life is not a constant. Now, one thing that a lot of people miss about this poem is that immediately after chapter 3, verse 8, so we've had this beautiful poem about the seasons, Ecclesiastes, the gatherer, then says, he asks his theme question, what do workers gain from all their hard work? This is that word profit again, from all the way back in 1:3. This is the what does my life add up to question. What have I produced at the end of my life that has lasting value? Now, if you ask that question of Ecclesiastes 3, 1-8, what you discover is that poem adds up to 0, right? If you say, what does this add up to? If this is a lifetime, what does it add it up to? You take being born, you take dying, you take planting and uprooting, you take killing and healing, crying, laughing, mourning, dancing. These seasons cancel each other out. And so if the question that we ask is, what profit has my life had? Or if the question that we ask is, what does my life add up to? For the gatherer, for Ecclesiastes, we will always be disappointed, and we will always have to conclude that our life has added up to nothing. Now, but if you go back and look at that poem, right, that's not nothing. Like, that's a lot of something. When you think about those things, like birth, death, planting, uprooting, tearing, building, crying, laughing, mourning, dancing, throwing, gathering, embracing, avoiding, searching, losing, love, hate, war, peace. Like, what a rich tapestry of experience that is. And it only becomes nothing when you ask the question, what is my life added up to? What profit is there? Right? Ecclesiastes is pushing us away from that question. Don't ask the question of profit, because human life is not about profit. It's not about what it adds up to in the end. It's about the experiences of being alive. That's what the gatherer is after. So if we can get rid of that question about profit and we can look at that poem, we can say, wow, what a life lived. I got to experience all of these things, some of them wonderful, some of them terrible, but what an experience I've had. For Ecclesiastes, that is the great hope for human life in a world in which we can't control the future and we can't control whether we're remembered after we die. All we have, and it's not, and it's a lot. It's not all the only thing we have. It's like we have something, is the experience of being alive. Now, there's one passage in Ecclesiastes 8:16 through 9:10 that I think kind of summarizes the book as a whole. And so I just wanted to walk us back through that a little bit so we can just piece back together the logic that Ecclesiastes comes to us with. So the gatherer says, when I applied my mind to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on earth, how one's eyes see sleep neither day nor night, then I saw all the work of God, that no one can find out what is happening under the sun. However much they may toil in seeking, they will not find it out. Even though those who are wise claim to know, they cannot find it out. Now this is where we were last time, right? God is running the world, but God is stronger than we are, and God is unknowable. God is inscrutable in the gatherer's mind. We think we know what God is up to, but when we look around the world, we see righteous people suffering, we see wicked people prospering, we see everybody dying and being forgotten, and we realize these rules that we've been given don't always work. So we don't know what God is doing, and we can't figure it out. That's where he starts us in this book. Then he examines everything, and he says, the righteous and the wise and our deeds are in the hand of God. Whether it's love or hate, one does not know. So God is looking out for the world, but we don't know whether that outcome is going to be a good one or a bad one. He goes on in verse 2 to say everything that happens is vanity. That's that word mist. Everything is vapor. Because the same fate comes to all, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the evil, the clean and the unclean, those who sacrifice and those who do not sacrifice. As are the good, so are the sinners, those who swear like those who shun an oath. This is an evil that happens under the sun, that the same fate comes to everyone. Moreover, the hearts of all are full of evil. Madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that, they go to the dead. So here, Ecclesiastes is really breaking down this idea that one's actions ought to, or do, produce certain kinds of results. He's saying righteous people and wicked people, wise people and foolish people, pious people and impious people, those who worship and those who don't worship. It all is the same. It all comes out the same for them. Some of them prosper, some of them suffer. There's no telling which does what for what reason. And so we enter into this world where religious observance doesn't have any value in terms of like payoff at the end. So if you're in this thing for the payoff, and Kohelet is saying that we don't know what the payoff is going to be. You can't guarantee yourself an outcome. And then at the end of all that, we're going to die. And we're going to die whether we're righteous or wicked, wise or foolish. We're going to die. We're going to be forgotten. That's where he gets us to. He makes a little bit of a shift in verse 4 from what we saw last time, though. Here he says, whoever is joined with all living has hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. Now, if you remember in chapter 4, which we talked about last time, Ecclesiastes says it's better to be dead than to be alive, and it's better to never be born than either of those things. Here, he says he's actually changed his tune. It is better to be alive than not to be alive. And the reason for that is because the living have hope. The living know things. So, I mean, what we know is that we're going to die, right? The living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. So it's better to know something than to know nothing. This is an interesting move that Ecclesiastes has made. It's not like a super like hopeful, like optimistic pie in the sky move, but it is something about experiencing human existence is worthwhile, and thank goodness we get to do it. It's better to be alive and insignificant than to spend our lives trying to be lions, trying to be kings, and die before our time. He goes on to say that those who have died, their memory of them is lost. They've perished. They will never again have any share. So once you're dead, you lose all contact to life. So enjoy your life. Even if you feel insignificant, even if you feel like you are a dog compared to the lions, like you've got a life, so live it. Now this passage in 9:7-10 is one of my favorite passages in Scripture, and it's a passage that actually was read in my wedding. And my students make fun of me when I tell them that because, I mean, like Ecclesiastes is a fairly depressing book. But this passage, in my mind, is a really rich passage. And so, I think it sort of sums up the message of the book of Ecclesiastes. The gatherer says, "Go, eat your food joyfully and drink your wine happily, because God has already accepted what you do." So eat and drink. Don't worry about whether God is approving of your eating and drinking, because God's going to do what God's going to do. So God has accepted what you're doing, so don't be anxious. Let your garments always be white. Don't run short of oil for your head. That means, basically like take a shower every day and wear clean clothes. Like be aware that you're going to die, but don't be morbid about that. Just live your life and push on through. Then this is the part I love. Enjoy your life with your dearly loved spouse all the days of your life. That's such a beautiful idea, right? Find someone you love, a partner, a spouse, a friend, a family. Find your people and enjoy your life with them. Now, my students always say, like, if you had just ended there, enjoy your life with your dearly loved spouse all the days of your life, that would be great. But that's not actually what the passage says exactly, is it? Enjoy your life with your dearly loved spouse all the days of your pointless life that God gives you under the sun. All the days of your pointless life. Because that's your part to play in this life and in your hard work under the sun. Whatever you are capable of doing, do with all your might, because there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in the grave, which is where you are headed. And my students always say, why did you why did you bring up death like in the middle of your wedding ceremony? And what I say to them is the point that Ecclesiastes is making is not that we should morbidly contemplate death all the time, but that awareness of the inevitability of death is what makes it possible for us to enjoy the moments that we have. When we deny death, when we think there is an interminable future stretching out in front of us, when we think there is a happily ever after that we're entering into, we think we have all the time in the world. And so we can forget to enjoy and to appreciate those things that are with us in this moment, here and now, right in front of us. So by reminding us that we're going to die and therefore that we should enjoy our life right now, Ecclesiastes is saying you're not always going to be able to enjoy this, right? This marriage is not going to last forever. Eventually, time and death, we already say in wedding ceremonies, until death do us part. Like it's already there, this awareness. But enjoy the moments you have while you have them, because you will not always have them. To me, that's one of the most authentic expressions of human existence that I know of. To think we're mortal beings who are given a certain amount of time. We cannot control our futures. What we can do is find people and things and work that give us joy, and we can put everything we've got into them for as long as we can. And when the time comes to mourn, or when the time comes to say goodbye, or when the time comes to uproot what we've planted, we remember that we had good times too, and we give thanks for those things. I think it's a beautiful book. I think it puts us in mind of some things that we don't often like to talk about, which is the reality of death, human mortality, and all the many, many ways we try to escape the idea that we're going to die. For Ecclesiastes, the worst thing in the world that we could do is to spend our whole life pursuing some kind of goal that we think is going to make us make a contribution, is going to be a profit. And then when we get to the end of our life, we realize not only that that thing didn't actually profit us in the long run, but that we spent our whole life pursuing a worthless thing at the expense of enjoying the people and the things that are right in front of us. So enjoy your life, is what he's saying. Let it come. Let come what may. Now, I don't know what you think about that. I wish we could talk about it, but I'm really interested in seeing in what you think, and I hope that you'll have good conversations about that. This is me if you want to find me and see other stuff that I've done. I'm at robertwilliamsonjr.com, and I'm on Facebook at robertwilliamsonjr.author. I'm a little bit on Twitter at rwilliamsonjr. You can email me at robert@robertwilliamsonjr.com. And if you have not listened to the Bible Worm podcast, which I co-host with my good friend Amy Robertson, who's a PhD in Hebrew Bible and a Jewish educator in Atlanta, I hope you'll listen to Bible Worm podcast. We talk about biblical texts and we just kind of unpack them and what they mean for us as scholars and as people of faith. So thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of this conversation. And I hope that you enjoy your life. See you next time.